Hi, it's Sylvester, and this is my third time making this video, my third time today making this video, because I made it the first time, and it did pretty well. I got like 31 views in just a few hours, which is pretty good for my channel. People seemed to like it, but I inadvertently broke the law in that video, so I had to take that video down because I do not want to get fined or arrested. You see, I encouraged people to go support Indigenous run illegal dispensaries, unlicensed dispensaries, and that is illegal to go to an unlicensed dispensary, and it is illegal to tell people to do that. It's illegal to encourage people to break the law. So in this video, I'm going to be very careful, and I just want to say I do not condone breaking the law. I am not encouraging it. You should not go to any unlicensed dispensaries, please and thank you. Just don't break the law, okay? And then I remade this video, but I didn't like how that one turned out because I was in a rush when I made it, and I don't feel like I captured the same... I lost a lot of the nuance of the original video. So here I am for a third time making the same video, and let's get into it. I want to talk about Indigenous-run unlicensed dispensaries and my experiences with them. Because, well, first of all, let me just say that I do not condone what white people have done to the Indigenous. I do not support what the Canadian government has done and continues to do to the Indigenous. I know that they are very much so systemically oppressed, and they are suffering with the aftermath of residential schools, and I know that a lot of Indigenous people are in extreme poverty, and selling cannabis for a lot of Indigenous people was a way to make ends meet. It was a way to feed their families. And then weed became legalized, and the government essentially stole all of those sales from the Indigenous. Now people buy their weed from the government instead of from the Indigenous, and so that has caused a lot of people to be financially worse off than they were before. And I think that it is incredibly unfair. I think that Indigenous people should be able to sell cannabis on the land that was originally theirs and still is theirs. You know, I'm living on Indigenous land, and I think that they should be able to sell cannabis on their land. But the government disagrees. You know, I mean, they can technically sell cannabis, but they need to go through a very strict licensing process, and I don't know what that process is like, but I imagine it's difficult and probably costly, if I had to guess. Again, I have no idea, but I would imagine getting a license to sell marijuana would probably cost a pretty penny. Again, I don't know that for sure, but anyways, it's just my opinion is that I think that Indigenous dispensaries should be allowed with or without a license, but that is just my opinion. I do not make the law, and so therefore I do not get to, I do not get to have a say in the matter because, yeah. So anyways, God, I feel like I'm failing at this video. I did so much better the first time around. I support the Indigenous, or at least I want to support the Indigenous, and I think supporting Indigenous-run businesses is very important. And so when I saw Indigenous-run dispensaries start popping up in London, Ontario, I wanted to support these dispensaries because I wanted to support the Indigenous. I wanted my money to go to the Indigenous instead of to the Canadian government. But I should not have done that because it was illegal. Going to these unlicensed dispensaries was illegal. And this is a bit of a cautionary tale because I went to an unlicensed dispensary and I believe that I received laced marijuana. I don't know that for a fact, and I was experiencing psychosis at the time, but I do believe that it was laced, and at the time I really, really did believe that it had been laced. And so basically the story is an unlicensed Indigenous-run dispensary opened up in London. It was the first one, I believe, and people were freaking out about it. There were all sorts of headlines talking about how it was illegal and this place needed to get shut down, etc., etc., but I wanted to support the Indigenous, so I went to this place and I bought a joint from them. And I smoked the joint, and the high I received from it was not a typical marijuana high. Now, I used to be a stoner, so I was quite familiar with what it felt like to be high on marijuana. But this didn't feel like the usual high. This felt like what I've heard being high on cocaine feels like, and what I've read on the internet. This seemed like a cocaine high, especially because it made my mouth and tongue numb, which is something that I've heard can happen. You know, like I used to buy cannabis on the streets. Again, please don't break the law. Don't do what I did, but I did. I used to buy cannabis illegally on the streets, and I was warned by people to look out for laced cannabis. And one of the things I was told is that if it makes your mouth and tongue numb, that means that there's probably cocaine or crack in there, because cocaine is a local anesthetic, and so it makes things numb. And so I smoked this joint. It made my mouth and tongue numb. It made me really energized. It felt like what I've heard a cocaine high feels like. And since cocaine is more expensive than crack, if you're going to lace marijuana with something, it's probably going to be something cheap. So it probably wasn't cocaine, it was probably crack. And from what I've read on the internet, a crack high is very similar to a cocaine high. So I freaked out. I was so upset. First of all, I had a surgery coming up. I had chest surgery in like a month or something like that. And so I freaked out because I thought like maybe this was going to stop me from being able to get my surgery, because I don't know, like they might do a blood test before they do my surgery and be like, there's drugs in your system, we can't do the surgery. Like, I don't know. That didn't end up happening, but I was scared that this would potentially jeopardize my ability to receive the surgery that I desperately needed. And I also was freaked out because obviously it felt really violating to have something put into my body that I didn't consent to being in my body. I did not want crack in my system. I wanted marijuana in my system. You know, I signed up to get marijuana, not crack. And so people will, this is a thing that happens. People do put hard drugs in marijuana if you buy it off the street or if you buy it from an unregulated source, because they want you to become addicted to the marijuana and then you keep buying more. And so, you know, I actually know somebody who became addicted to meth because he was smoking weed that he bought on the street and it was laced with meth. And by the time he found this out, it was too late and he was already addicted. So that is terrifying, to think that these people, the people I bought the weed from, were giving innocent people crack addictions without their knowledge or consent. That is a terrifying thought. And there's also the possibility that, like, if you have something in your weed and you don't know it's there, like if there was crack in that weed and I smoked too much weed, I could have overdosed on the crack that was in there and I could have died. You know, like, crack is whack. Crack is not okay. Crack is, you should never go anywhere near crack. Crack is really, really bad. And so the thought that it was in my body without my consent really, really freaked me out and really, really pissed me off. So I did the only thing that I thought I could do at the time, which is I called the police. I called the police reporting line and I told them that I thought this Indigenous run unlicensed dispensary was giving out laced marijuana. And the police said to me, well, you shouldn't have purchased weed from them. That was not legal. These people are unlicensed. What were you expecting? We can't really do anything about this. And so I guess that's kind of fair. You know, I did break the law by purchasing that marijuana. So, and, you know, that is a risk that you take when you purchase marijuana that is not regulated and not sold by the government, which, again, you should not do. If you're going to purchase marijuana, please purchase it legally from a licensed dispensary, please, because again, this is always a risk that you run. When you're buying weed from the government, you know that it's not going to be laced with anything. You also are able to know the potency, how much, you know, the percentage of THC that's in there. You're going to be able to rest assured that it was grown safely without the use of pesticides or herbicides that might harm you. Like, you just know that government weed is safe because it's really, really well regulated. But unlicensed dispensaries, obviously there's no regulations, and so this is just something you have to look out for, and this is why you you definitely should not buy marijuana from anywhere but a licensed dispensary. Please and thank you. But I obviously, since the police weren't going to do anything about it, I was frustrated and I really wanted to do something. So I made an angry video telling people about the experience I had, telling people that I had laced weed, and I left a negative Google review saying, be careful buying from this place because I got weed that was laced. And then I felt guilty about it because I felt like I was attacking the Indigenous, and these people are already oppressed. They're already minorities who are being harmed by the government and by the actions of white people, and I didn't want to be one of those white people harming Indigenous people, and I just kept second-guessing myself, thinking like maybe it was in my head, because again, at the time I was experiencing psychosis, so I just kept thinking to myself, maybe I'm wrong. Like, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm accusing these people of selling me laced weed and they didn't actually do that? Because that would be a really bad thing to accuse somebody of doing that when they didn't do that. So I panicked and I got rid of my video and I deleted the Google review, and I decided to go back to this Indigenous unlicensed dispensary and buy some more marijuana from them. And this time the marijuana was, I don't think it was laced, but it was really, really, really weak. It did not get me high at all. And so, the thing is, I kept buying it, even though it didn't get me high. I just kept buying it thinking, maybe this time it will get me high. Maybe this stuff will be better than the last batch. Maybe it was just a bad batch. But it never got me high. So one day I went to the dispensary and I got mad at them, and I'm like, your weed is not getting me high. This stuff is garbage. And they said, no, your tolerance is just too high. Which I don't think that was the case, because at that point I had been smoking a bunch of the stuff that I had bought from them, and so it doesn't make sense for my tolerance to be too high if the weed that I was smoking was stuff that wasn't getting me high, if that makes any sense. But it's possible that my tolerance was just really high, but I don't think that that's the case. I think they were just selling me really garbage weed, but they were $20 ounces, and an ounce is 28 grams, and a gram generally goes for like $10, so an ounce should be around $280, and instead they were selling it for $20, so that's incredibly cheap, like insanely cheap. So, I couldn't really be surprised that $20 ounces was not the highest quality weed, but, again, I just kept buying it because it was so cheap that I just couldn't resist. But then, I went to them and I got angry, saying this stuff's not getting me high. They blamed my tolerance, and so I bought something from them that was a little bit more expensive, and I smoked it. I bought a joint from them, and I thought, this is going to get me high because this is more, I'm paying a little bit more, so it should be at least better quality weed than the $20 ounce weed. And then I went out and I smoked the joint, and I smoked the whole thing, and I didn't feel anything. I didn't get high at all, and so I was so pissed off. I went back to the dispensary and I started yelling at them like, your weed sucks. I want a refund. This stuff is garbage. It didn't get me high at all. And the guy started yelling back at me saying, it's just your tolerance. Like, the weed is good. And then I started crying because I was an emotional wreck and my emotions were just all over the place at that time. And so I started crying, and this made the guy feel uncomfortable, and then it made him feel guilty. And so he went in and he's like, I'm going to get you some weed that's going to get you high. Don't worry. And he brought me a joint that we smoked together. And he said, like, see, you just have to be calm. You come in all angry, and it's going to make us react angrily. And so you gotta just be calm, man. And I swear it's just your tolerance. Your tolerance is too high. Like, our weed is good. And this stuff's definitely going to get you high. And so we smoked that joint together, and it did not get me high. So, again, I maintain that their weed was just shit, but it could have been my tolerance, but I do think that their weed was just shit. So, again, I had a pretty unpleasant experience with this unlicensed Indigenous dispensary. I did try to give them a chance. I really, really did. I really did. And again, you should not buy from an unlicensed dispensary. Don't do what I did. Please don't. But I did, and I got laced weed allegedly. You know, I believe it was laced, and then I got weed that just did not get me high. So all around, pretty bad experience at this dispensary. Then a couple more Indigenous-owned, unlicensed dispensaries started popping up around London, and so I went to a different Indigenous-owned dispensary, unlicensed dispensary, and again, I shouldn't have done that. Don't buy weed illegally, but I did. And this other dispensary, their weed was really good, and it did get me high. Just a couple puffs of it got me like super high, and I don't think it was laced. So I had a good experience at that dispensary, but the one that I believe sold me laced weed is no longer running. It got shut down by the police. So but there still are some Indigenous owned unlicensed dispensaries running in London, Ontario still, and it's only a matter of time probably before they get shut down, because again, they are running illegally, and I don't think that that's right. I think we should allow these people to sell their cannabis on their land, but I am not in charge here. I don't get to make that call. So once again, please do not break the law. Please do not buy weed illegally. And if you do, which you shouldn't, please don't. But if you do, just remember that there are risks. It could be laced. It could just, you don't know the potency of it. You don't know how safely it was grown, what kind of chemicals were used on it as they were growing it. You don't know like how they treated it after they harvested it. Like you just don't know, because it's unregulated. So again, please be very careful if you decide to go to an unlicensed dispensary, which you should not. Please don't. I am not encouraging you to in any way, shape, or form, but I know some people out there are going to do it anyways, and so if you are going to do it anyways, just be careful, all right? But also don't do it. Don't do it, all right? I know you want to support the Indigenous. I do too, but there are other ways to support Indigenous people than by supporting an unlicensed dispensary. So, yeah, that is all. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. I hope this is the last time I make this video. Stay frosty. Bye.